Hello everyone, it's thenewtz here with my first piece of long-form content. I'll be discussing the webcomic Homestuck, breaking down what all goes into the comic and giving my 2 cents on what all happens. Now, the question you may be asking is, what is Homestuck? Homestuck is a webcomic that ran from 2009 to 2019, made by Andrew Huo, as well as many guest artists over the years. It is a coming-of-age story about taking back control of the narrative. It has a very odd but entertaining concept, at least enough for me to now have read it 6 times as of writing this. It is broken up into acts, with the theater motif being laden throughout the comic, and the site it's hosted on at certain points. There's obviously more to the story than I could ever briefly summarize, so I will be taking you through a look at Homestuck. This will be a series until I finish the comic or get bored of covering it, so let's get right into Act 1. In Act 1, we meet a 13-year-old boy that we need to name, and the comic tells us that we need to name him Zeusmel Pooplord, but we later find out his name is John Egbert, a dorky trickster who lives with his well-intentioned cake-baking father. John is a gamer and is a shit programmer, and seemingly likes Ghostbusters a whole lot. He is currently excited and awaiting the Sburban beta, a new game coming out on 4/13, John's birthday. Did I mention that was today? He and his online friends, who communicate through a software called PesterChum, plan to play this game together. We are then introduced to capsulogging and the Sylladex, a term for storing things in your Sylladex, and a Sylladex is storage, though each Sylladex has a different storage method. John's is set to the stack modus, so he cannot access anything under the last capsulogged item, though he does later obtain the first in, first out modus, and can switch between them. John also allocates his strife specipus, essentially a weapons class indicator, to a hammer, not thinking it to be of much use currently. We spend a bit of time with John, hanging up a poster, having intrusive thoughts, looking over his various movie posters, and now speaking to one of John's online friends with the handle TurnTechGodhead. TG asks John what he got for his birthday, as well as finding apple juice in their closet, which John implies may be piss. They also discuss the game, which apparently got mid-reviews, and we also find out that TG's fetch modus is hashmap, which I'll get into when we meet them in a later. We then follow John and his journey to the mailbox to get his game. John seems to have quite an odd fondness for Harlequins and clowns, as well as finding out that John's great-grandmother was the Betty Crocker, which is why his dad bakes so much cake. John messes up the urn with his grandmother's ashes in it. Okay, hold on. John messes up the urn with his grandmother's ashes in it and shoddily fixes it and places it back on the mantle. Then he detours back upstairs, finding another message from a different friend, Tentacle Therapist, who seems to know that he is in a goofy disguise, even though that she has no visual indication. John continues through the house, going into his father's study and even playing a tune on the piano, which is Showtime by Malcolm Brown. Finally, we exit the house, only to find out that John's dad has already beat him to the mail. Again, before going back in, we see John have yet another weird, intrusive thought. We are then led to enter. John goes in to find his father, already there, wielding a cake as the song Harlequin by Hadley plays. John's dad sees through John's disguise, and we are led to Strife, which plays the tune Showtime by Malcolm Brown as well. Dad then tosses a cake into John's face, lowering the prankster's gambit. I'm not explaining that. And John drops his smoke pellets, which do absolutely nothing. Dad then makes you take the cake he is holding, which makes John drop a very, very large book onto the smoke pellets, which causes them to go off. This allows a distraction that gets John to go back up to his room with the PDA, the beta, and his mail in hand. Back upstairs, John's PesterChum is going off. He has a message from both TG and another person named Garden Gnostic wishing him a happy birthday. TG asks about John's ability to pull bitches, and if he received the mail, which John confirms getting the mail. After this conversation, John ends up installing the beta and reads The Midnight Crew, which is another MS Paint adventure, to pass the time. John opens his mail to find a bunny from one of his favorite movies sent to him by his friend TG. As John opens this present, though, Suburb is ready to be played and TT is messaging him, waiting. John talks to TT and presses enter, leading us to Spurb's loading screen, and we are introduced to Sburban Jungles, one of the songs of all time. We see TT mess around with John's real house using the game they are playing, almost like The Sims. We then see three very important machines, the Cruxtruder, the Totem Lathe, and the Alchemitter, which TT reveals is for a punch card based alchemy system. TT jeers John about the state of his bathroom, which happened to be because Silodex, and attempts to clean, but, GG then asked John about the package that they had sent, which is currently locked in Dad's car, but is interrupted by an explosion outside of their house. John starts messing with the Cruxtruder, which he attempts to hit on the top with a sledgehammer, but needs help from TT. Hitting it causes it to open and a timer to start, counting down from 4:13. John then grabs the Cruxite owl from the Cruxtruder, and then TT prototypes his Colonel Sprite to a Harlequin, leading us to experience Harlequin by Mark Hadley again, though they both still need to prototype the Colonel Sprite again to understand what exactly it's saying. John heads up to the Alchemitter, which he and TT then create 3 generic objects with the dowel. John looks up at the sky to see a meteor seemingly coming directly for him. That is what the timer's for, which TT confirms. John uses a pre-punched card on the Totem Lathe and sticks the dowel in, while TT puts the bathroom back together. Unfortunately, TT drops connection and the bathtub, which traps John inside of his room, with only 2 minutes left on the clock. We then cut to a young girl standing in her room, waiting for us to name her. Hey, wait a minute, this seems a little bit familiar. Anyway, after finding out Flighty Broad is not her name, but Rose Lalonde is, we also learn that Rose is a teen girl with too many hobbies, like knitting, reading, psychoanalysis, and creative writing. We also see Rose exhibit some of the same intrusive thoughts like John. She then plays us a haunting refrain on the violin, which is Aggrieve, and we find out that her fetch modus is Tree. Tree causes the leaves to be safely accessed, but the root object must stay in place or every item is dropped out of the Silodex. Rose is also into Lovecraftian horrors, and it's very much implied that she is goth in many points in the story. Rose's mom, somewhat like John's father, collects withered paintings and paraphernalia and displays them around her house. Rose does not like interacting with her mother due to her being an alcoholic and the general disconnect between the two, causing her to sneak around the upstate mansion. She then gets to the observatory, which allows her to reconnect with John on his game, and to help him get out of his room to the Alchemitter with 40 seconds on the clock. The totem causes an apple to appear, which John takes a bite out of as the meteor hits, ending Act 1 as Suburban Countdown by Mark Hadley plays. Here's the part where I'm going to give a little bit of my 2 cents. John seems like a kid who doesn't have many in real life friends, who probably lives somewhere in the Midwest, meaning man probably doesn't have a reason to go out and make friends. I can make that joke, I'm a Midwesterner, but regardless, a cool dude. I think there's something to be said about how John sees his father though. Rose is obviously the therapist friend and seems to deal with some stuff with her mother being a prolific alcoholic. We didn't get to spend as much time with Rose in this act other than chat logs, but I can assume that Rose is much like John in the friend department. Speaking of, Rose points out to John about him complaining about his father, which he kind of glosses over, even though the worst thing that his dad does to him is bake too much cake and collects clowns, though we will find out the reason for that later. Rose seems almost envious while they're on this topic. The game in the comic is a very abstract concept that would be very hard to fully grasp if you were just plopped in with no manuals other than it's just Sims build mode with extra steps and real people are your Sims. It's a neat comic to kind of base your webcomic around, and there's a lot more complexities to the game than what we are actually shown in the first act. The pacing in the first act is both snail's pace and a lightning round of information all at the same time. Act 1 is commonly complained about in the fandom as pretty slow and pretty boring. In fact, that pace continues till about Act 3 or 4. But these first acts have some very witty humor that just can't be ignored. If you guys liked the subject matter of this video, I would suggest reading it on your own terms on Homestuck.com if it wasn't broken to all shit due to Flash's death. There are a few Flash games that are in the comic that are completely unplayable now that were an integral part of the story. Instead of updating a lot of the Flash to HTML5, Viz Media and Hussey would rather let the comic rot pretty much in digital obscurity. But there is an unofficial browser that you can use to read the comic that I will link down below. Other than that, thank you all for stopping by. This was originally supposed to include Act 2 as well, but time crunch said otherwise. Drop a like if you like my vid and want to see more. I think my next video will be my card collection, as that won't take much research and gives me enough time to get out the next Homestuck project. I hope you guys all have a good day, and I will see you guys later.